My name is Chris Dawkins. I'm a second generation farmer on the Pyramid, which is a 415 hectare sheep and cattle property at the confluence of the Avon and Waihopai rivers in the Waihopai Valley. It's a dryland pastoral property receiving about 700 millimetres of rainfall annually, and we're 250 metres above sea level at this point. Around about 15% of the property, or 60 hectares, is in trees of various descriptions, from plantation forestry, managed for timber production, right through to amenity trees. This particular block that we're looking at is just a 6 hectare hillside that was planted in 14 different poplar clones in 2003. I was a wee bit concerned that over the years the property had been denuded of natural vegetation and needed to put something back onto the slope. Although it's difficult to appreciate in these conditions, but the hillside itself is reasonably unstable and is prone to slumping and slipping. So the poplars were just a ways to a means in terms of trying to stabilise the hillside. Just wide-spaced poplar poles for both shade and shelter, but they're all in their own right recognised timber varieties, so there could possibly be potential for timber at some stage in the future. I bought the property in 1978 and it was relatively treeless at that stage. My father had moved in from family farm in the Outer Sounds at Port Gore to purchase the Pyramid in 1954. So he'd only been here for 20 odd years before I brought the property, and he had major work on his hands in terms of weed control and fencing and general pasture improvement. So not a lot of tree planting went on. Consequently, when he retired to Blenheim in 1978, he continued to come out to the farm on a daily basis and was able to do a lot of tree planting that I tended to give a higher degree of priority to initially. So he was actually responsible for a lot of the tree planting after I bought the property. The property has actually got a 8-kilometre river boundary on the southern and western side with, well, initially the Tummel River, then the Avon, and then the Waihopai River. And it's also bisected by numerous creeks that come off the range out to our east. So I chose a long time ago to fence off all the waterways to try and improve the habitat and environment on the fragile slopes around the creeks. Mm-hmm. Initially, we had a plan to plant 15% of the land area in trees. We've actually achieved that now. Wanted to focus on alternative species originally, and hence the eucalypts and blackwoods, also cypresses. Unfortunately, they were rather challenging, and it became obvious early on in the piece that they possibly weren't going to generate a huge income. So the bulk of the plantings, probably 80% of them, are radiata managed for timber production. We're at a stage now where we can harvest trees on a perpetual basis. We planted small blocks of trees every year with the idea of being able to harvest on an annual basis 1,200 tonnes of timber. In reality, we won't be harvesting every year because of the cost of getting machinery onto the farm, but we are able to continuously harvest on a regular basis. So we'll look to replant those blocks of radiata, probably in pine, because that's what they were identified as being most suitable for. We've certainly got potential to plant more shelter belts, amenity plantings. Would like to continue to do more poplar hillside plantings for soil stability reasons. I think there's potential to probably plant out more of the wetter gullies and create wetlands, which we could look at. A lot of our plantings on farm are probably reasonably typical of this area here that was planted in 1999. It was an area that ran into a sharp corner in the paddock. It was rather wet and wasn't conducive at all for mowing for hay, that being one of my main hay areas. Also, it was a bit of a trap for stock, so the logical thing to do was just fence it off and plant it out. The cypress trees themselves are the Leylandii clones, fern down, which is specifically for timber production. It's not a particularly good site for them, and that canker has been an issue, but hopefully we will have sufficient survival to warrant a final crop. Likewise, the poplar trees are recognised timber varieties, but they are essentially for aesthetic reasons in that it's too wet in places for the cypresses. Same site again, but now facing west rather than east, so turn round 180 degrees. Same hay paddock. Wasn't practical to be able to mow through the wet gully, and also a bit of a hazard in terms of newborn lambs, so chose to fence the gully off and retire it from grazing and turn it into a wetland, which I imagine it possibly was at one stage, albeit 150 years ago. Conscious of the fact that need good stock water for good stock, consequently behind the eucalypts is a similar gully that was fenced off during the 1980s and retired from grazing, planted in numerous species to protect the catchment area for a large stock water dam that I reticulate water from down into troughs on the river flat. So just a ways and means of protecting the stock water resource on the property. Although I had indicated the property was virtually treeless when I purchased it in 1978, I had helped my father plant a 4-hectare block in 1968 when I was a schoolboy, and I have subsequently harvested that 40 years later. So we are on the harvesting bandwagon, so to speak. This block here has got a wee way to go in that it wasn't planted until 1992. They were trees I actually grew myself from cuttings, vegetative cuttings from an earlier planting of a woodlot that I had done with genetically superior trees. We've predominantly done all the work ourselves on silviculture over the years, my father and myself planting, although prior to that the propagation, and then the thinning's been rather minimal in that we tended to have planted at final crop spacings with the cuttings. And then my children have done a fair bit of the pruning to fund their way through university in their student days. As to the future of the property and subsequent plantings, I guess we've got the opportunity through forestry rights to retain ownership of the blocks. Uncertain at this stage as to future involvement of the family, so we'll just continue to plant with the options available to us in the future with alternative forms of ownership of the trees and also the farm for that matter. I've been a member of the local branch of the Farm Forestry Association since I purchased the farm, and found that association with other tree planters extremely valuable, in that I was never wanted to be in a position where I learnt from my mistakes. I was hoping to be able to learn from the advice and experiences of other people. Consequently, we're fortunate in this area in that we have got a number of enthusiastic members that I've been able to benefit from. So a wonderful source of both knowledge and motivation for tree planting. Strongly recommend joining the local association. My philosophy for farming has been to use each separate area of the property for its best natural use without actually trying to modify the environment too much artificially. Consequently, there are large areas of the property that are best retired from grazing and returned to what they would have been originally, which would have been just natural vegetation. We have changed the species with probably more exotic type trees, but I feel it's the best use for the land and ultimately gives us a little bit of diversification, in that we haven't got all our eggs in a perishable basket of meat and wool. The timber does actually give me flexibility and options for the future, both in terms of my own immediate needs, but also subsequent generations. Probably one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received about tree planting was from the patriarch of the association himself, Neil Barr, when he suggested to me, get those trees in the ground as quick as possible, sonny. And I can't help but think that he was onto it, because he did harvest 3 rotations of pines in his lifetime. So yeah, with the trees in the ground, you have got options. So yes, I would suggest probably give tree planting a very high degree of priority, because ultimately the rewards are going to be quite significant.